Is everyone here to talk about electric cars?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're gonna do a brief presentation, and then we're gonna talk about electric bicycles as well, which is really cool. And then we're gonna have a panel discussion where we get to answer all of your questions. So what I'll try to do is bang through the presentation fairly quickly, and then get to what you're really here for, which is to ask folks that are driving EVs today about their experience and hopefully answer all your questions. And so I will maybe ask a few questions as we go along, and I will reward folks that participate. Okay. So, there's a couple left in my last presentation.
Yeah, that's
All right. So anyway, that's today. That's a picture. All right. So we're going to talk about electric cars. That's a nice Tesla model. I think that's 3 of them. I'm not sure. So let's talk about when. That was my first question. I just wrote. When did the first electric car get generated or get built? And it was actually in 1832. So one of the nuances or maybe surprises behind electric versus gas is electric cars came out before gasoline cars, believe it or not, in 1832. But they had limited range, they were used for local driving, but they were really easy to start and drive. And then in 1910, the Model T was built, it had longer range, but it was really hard to start. Did anyone ever crank a car to start it? Yeah, cool. I actually did once as well. I went to Ireland when I was a young child, and the car they had there had to be cranked to start it. It was pretty fun. But I helped crank it and didn't help very much. So anyway, limited access to gasoline, but access improved, roads improved, and that became the dominant source of electricity or transportation. So there's a couple types of electric cars, and you're gonna, I think, hear from both types today. There's the plug-in hybrid and extended range. These are ones that use gasoline and electricity to run. They can switch. They can either switch back and forth, or some of them actually blend it and do both at the same time. And so you'll hear about some of them. There's the Prius. I'm not going to name them all, but there's a plethora of them out on the market today. But the Prius was one of the early ones, a plug-in Prius. My daughter has one of those. There's a Chevy Bolt. Not the Bolt, which is out now as well. So there's some great advantages. You can still do long range in it, even with a short range battery. Can easily substitute for a gasoline only car. And for many drivers, it'll actually do 100% of your daily commute in electric usage. So if you needed something that, hey, I wanted to drive every day in electric, and I'm worried about long range, you can get something like this as kind of like a nice blend of, I can do most of my commuting with this vehicle. Their disadvantages, though, it's more complex. So now you got 2 drivetrains. That needs more things to maintain, more things that can break, many more parts that are part of it, and it still burns gasoline, which is kind of where we need to get off of. There's all electric vehicles, or the battery electric vehicles. These are the battery only. There is no gasoline at all in these vehicles. The Nissan Leaf was one of the first mainstream ones that came out around that. All of the Tesla models are like this. The Chevy Bolt, not the Bolt, is another good example of this. There's others as well. I wrote this probably before a lot of the newer models came out, but these are some of the ones you may have heard of. Performance, the range is fine for most commutes. It may be challenging on longer distance trips. We'll talk about that today as well. Some are better than others. Your range does decrease in cold weather. You should be aware of that whenever you're buying an electric vehicle. The range that they put on the sticker is not the range you get when it's 20 degrees out. So just so you know, it does change. So we talked about some pros and cons. On the pro side, the acceleration is beautiful. It's quiet, it's smooth. Your operating costs should be lower. You'll have your fuel, your fuel is less. Your electricity costs a lot less than gasoline. The maintenance is less. I say people ask me all the time, how much time do you spend charging your car? And I actually tell them, well, for my daily commute, I don't spend any time filling up. I just plug it in when I get home, and it's always filled when I leave. There are some subsidies and perks that go along with it, and of course the bottom line, environmental benefits, which is the reason that I went to my electric car. The cons right now for an electric car, we're going to talk about that, how that's changing. The initial cost of an electric car is going to be more than a comparable gasoline vehicle. There is a longer fuel time on long trips, so you do have this. It's not as convenient if I was to drive to Chicago in an electric car than a gasoline.
you have to stop to fill up longer than you would for gasoline. The charging infrastructure has come a long way. When I wrote this, that was probably more of a challenge than it is today, and we have a slide on that as well. Yeah, there's range limitations for city-to-city travel. So some myths, common electric vehicle myths. The myth that plug-in electric vehicles can only support short trips, not daily commutes. The fact is the average is daily commute is 40 miles or less, and most full battery EVs today are over 200 miles, and certainly can handle that, and you can certainly handle it with the hybrids that we talked about as well. The myth that electric vehicles will make your energy bill go way up, and the fact is that you will pay more for electricity, but I haven't bought gasoline for my car in 6 years, so I can say I spend considerably less in energy costs for my daily commute. And it talks about the 14 cents here. That's a true statement. I think I've calculated that my electric car costs 4 cents per mile to run versus a comparable gasoline car, which would be 14 cents per mile. So just the energy cost is dramatically less, about a quarter to a third would be a good rule of thumb. The myth that clean energy vehicles aren't clean if they run off the power grid. It's not true. Even when emissions are taken into account, EVs contribute significantly less to greenhouse emissions. And the other thing I'll say is the grid is greening as we go, and if you look at a systemic solution long term, you got to do both at the same time, right? So we got to get to electrical transportation while at the same time we get more efficient, more a lower carbon grid, and that's going to happen as well. And then the last myth we'll talk about is electric vehicles are far more expensive than the average car. The fact is there are incentives there in place to help defray that, and with lower operating costs, it's not true. And we have a slide later on in this, we're going to talk about the future's changing that as well. The last, technology changes. If you know how compute technology changed, where it gets cheaper year over year, the same thing's happening with the biggest expense in an electric car, which is the battery as well. This is what a Leaf versus a Camry, a fuel economy sticker. These are actually the fuel economy stickers from the vehicles themselves. I just qualified this, probably a year or so old. But you can see on the Camry, I'm sorry, on the Leaf, the fuel economy says 116 mpge, and for the gasoline car, the Camry, it says 26 mpg. So we all know what mpg is, miles per gallon. So you can expect your Camry is going to get 26, and the mpge, which is an equivalency. So they compare the energy to move the vehicles, and they do a little bit of a conversion rate to say, so that you can equally compare the amount of energy it takes to move one vehicle versus the other. And with that calculus in place, they're saying that the Leaf gets the equivalent of 116 miles per gallon, so that you can compare it to a light gasoline vehicle. And so you can see the annual cost savings, the 9,100 over 5 years. For the Leaf versus 1,850 for a comparable gas car for the Camry. So again, I guess the government with their stickers has given us some mechanism to do a really nice comparison of fuel efficiency and savings that you'll get. So just know that mpge is comparable to mpg as far as the energy usage. Maintenance for going down this comparison of the Leaf and the Camry. These are some of the maintenance items that you might expect in one versus the other. They look new tires. I just got new tires on my EV. They cost just as much on my EV. Oil change. You don't do oil changes anymore. You still need to do that on Camry. Transmission fluid. I don't have a transmission on my car, which is nice. Coolant for the Leaf. They say every 125,000 miles you have to maintain your coolant, and the Camry's every 30. So there is some maintenance there. There are no spark plugs in the Leaf. That's nice. Brakes, and you still need brakes in a Leaf. Now I'll qualify, I say half, and that's being generous. In my electric car driving experience, I rarely use my brake pedal. Does that make sense? So they have this thing called regenerative braking. When I come off the accelerator, it goes into regen mode, which starts to slow the car down, and it's converting kinetic energy, the energy of motion, into chemical energy, the energy of the battery. So it's actually recharging the battery to slow down the car. So it's really cool. So I've learned to drive differently, that it actually, I rarely use my brakes. Timing belts don't exist in electric cars, and then the rest are, the same window washer fluid. The funny story about my car is people ask me what do I need to maintain on it, and every time I bring it in for maintenance, they refill the window washer fluid for me. So one fluid that they do. And they do switch my wiper blades out, so that's nice. Okay. So they're not maintenance free, just, we don't make that claim, but there's a lot less maintenance. So the charging technology, there's level 1, level 2, and then I'll call it DC fast charge, I'll call it level 3. Some even call it level 4, depending on which technology it is, but level 1 is your standard outlet. You don't get, you get 2 to 5, I get 4 miles per hour when I plug into a standard outlet. So it would take me days to recharge my car. So I typically charge from a level 2. I have a level 2 at home. A level 2 is comparable to your electric stove, or if you had an electric dryer, that's a level 2. Basically, it's it's a 240 volt connection. So you would likely want to have that at home, and you don't have to, depending on how much you drive. I have the luxury of plugging in at home or at work now, so it's pretty awesome. They both have level 2 chargers. And then the fast charge is usually in a commercial setting. They build that for fast charging if you're going city to city travel where you need to charge and keep going. There is the DC fast charge, 480 volt. Tesla has their own network for that. There's ChargePoint network, a couple of networks that are out there to provide level 3 charging for that as well. You can get, in this example, 50 to 100 miles in a 10-minute charge of range. So that's pretty decent. Cup of coffee in the restroom, and you can come back out and keep going. So this is what the charging infrastructure looked like about a year ago. I guess it's a little bit more now, but each one of these represents a charging station. You can kind of guess where I-95 is in this picture. The orange ones are that DC high-speed chargers that I mentioned. So you can see the I-95 corridor has a plethora now of high-speed chargers that support long-distance driving. You can see all the green ones are what you call level 2 chargers. So there is a plethora of options available. This is a screenshot from PlugShare. I have PlugShare on my phone as well, so I don't go anywhere where I can't find charging stations either. So. And Tesla looks like this. I talked about their proprietary network, so if you do want to plunge and get a Tesla Model 3, you'd be hard-pressed to go anywhere. Well, you can pretty much go anywhere in the U.S. It's rare that you'd be more than 100 miles away from a high-speed. This would be more like a level 4 charger, so the fastest charging technology that's available. Solar, long-range driving does exist. This is a little chart about how far we drive. These are statistics, and I guess 2 cars that are shown as an example. So just how to interpret this graph is, if you look, it's really at the bottom, it talks about how far you drive, that's miles. So right in the middle there, you see 85% of Americans drive 60 miles or less. So your Chevy Bolt all-electric range is going to kind of cover for 85% of commuters. And you can see, if you wanted to get up higher, the Leaf's range gets you in the 90 to 93% of all Americans could drive a Leaf and defray their daily commute costs. Again, we're not talking about vacation trips here. We're talking about your travel to and from work. So the point of this is, it can, if you wanted to, there's a way to get there to where you can defray your commute costs on a daily basis. And this is how long you park. I guess this total time vehicle parked at work. So if you have an opportunity to plug at work, chances are, and I do this today, we actually have to share our chargers at work. We get 4 hours, 4-hour blocks, but in 4 hours at work, I replenished my entire commute easily. Actually, I think about 3 hours of plug-in replenishes my daily commute. And where people charge, typically you're going to charge at home. You may charge at work. Fleets have different areas. And the point of this is, with an electric car, your experience changes. You're going to plug in when you're parked. And you're typically parked 10, 12 hours at home every night, and 6 to 12 hours at work, depending where you work. So there's ample opportunity. The thing that your car does the most is be parked. And so when it's parked, you can plug it in. All right, level 1 charging, we talked about that. That's the slow charging, charges all day. Level 2 is a little bit faster, it's your 220. We talked about that. This is typically what if you do drive or own an EV, I would recommend getting a level 2 charger at home. The fast charging, very fast, well, you wouldn't install this at home, this is commercial. Again, you can see this on highways, rest stops and things like that. So, yeah. think I just sell that. Level 2 charging does cost money to do it at home, just like installing any electrical equipment at home, right? You get an appliance, you install it, you hire an electrician if you don't do your own, and yeah, it'll charge you anywhere. I put 500 to 2,000. Honestly, mine costs $200 because I did my own. If you are handy with electricity and you can put an outlet in, you can install your own. So I talked about the cost to own a car. This is the price parity point for a 5-year ownership for a 200-mile range vehicle. And this chart, and again, we talked about the battery price coming down, but the red line is the cost of the Camry, the 5-year cost of ownership, and the blue line is the cost of this electric vehicle. And according to this, somewhere around 2019, 2020, we reached price parity, meaning it costs the same to operate one versus the other. And you can see one kind of stays flat and the other one continues to go down because it's technology. So by 2022, it probably won't make sense to buy a Camry or an electric car from an economics perspective. You would look at it that way and say, yeah, that makes sense. And this is showing the same thing. The total cost of ownership over time is becoming, ICE is an internal combustion engine and BEV is a battery electric vehicle. And you can see that it's becoming considerably, the projections are to be considerably, this is from Pico, less your cost of ownership over time with the battery electric vehicle. And the next few slides are just doing the kind of cost comparisons of different vehicles. These are the hybrid electrics, the plug-in electrics, your Honda Accord plug-in, your Prius. You can see their cost of ownership is around $36,000 for 5 years. This is the hybrid's payback cost. You can see the savings on the bottom for each of them. You can see the fuel economies around 40s to 50s. And again, these are your hybrids. You're looking at your plug-in hybrids now. You can see your efficiencies are 95 to 111. Your savings are a little higher on the bottom. And then your EVs, again, very, very high efficiency and slightly even higher savings. So went through a lot of information, and we are going to bring up another presentation by Kimberly Zach from the Narberth Bike Club, and we're going to do that and get into our panel discussion.
Hi. Hi. So we heard about electric cars, and now I'm here to talk about my electric vehicle. So in 2007, I was living in New Orleans, dating my husband, and we decided to start using a bicycle to get around. You know, New Orleans is a flat city and it's pretty compact. I don't know how many of you have been there, but we were using our bicycle to go to jazz fest, to go to restaurants, to go to the movies, to get to work. And then, let's see if I can figure this out, sorry. In 2012, we had our first child, and I was trying to get around with a traditional bike that had a bike seat on the back. We were living in Washington, D.C., and really trying to use the bike for local stuff because driving in Washington, D.C. is not a very enjoyable experience. And my range was getting pretty limited, getting around on the bike. So we got a cargo bike. I was able to go to Trader Joe's, get my grocery shopping done. We were able to go out exploring on the weekend. And the cargo bike itself just really opened up our possibilities for getting around as a family on a bicycle, ditching the car. So when I was pregnant with our second child, my range was becoming more and more limited, biking just a traditional bike. So we were living in the Philadelphia area in Manayunk, and as you know, it's really hilly. And one day I could not make it to the library. So I called my husband crying, and he said, let me add a pedal assist to the bike so you can keep getting around. Well, that was a game changer. It completely transformed us moving around Philadelphia on a bicycle as a family. So we now live in Narberth, and we've had a pedal assist, which is an electric bike that you put energy into. You're pedaling it, you're getting a workout. When you come upon a hill and you're under a heavy load with kids, groceries, etc., it gives you a little bit of boost to help you up the hill. So whereas with an electric car, the car is doing the work. With an electric pedal assist bike, you're still getting a workout. I canceled my gym membership years ago. I get around, I don't worry about the gym anymore. I'm multitasking, right? I'm getting stuff done and I'm getting some exercise. So we're now biking year-round, and this is our primary mode of transportation. We live in Narberth. We do have one car. It sits in our driveway unless we're going to Costco or on a road trip. So this is just a snapshot of the examples of ways that we use our paddle-assisted electric bike for local transportation. This top picture is I brought my daughters to a sleepover at Grandma's. Down here, dropping off donations at Green Drop. Earlier this year, we biked all the way to Citizens Bank Park, down at the bottom, for a Phillies game. And then the top right is just really highlighting that this is our year-round mode of transportation. We bike year-round unless it's icy. We have our winter gear. My kids love being on the bike. And then last but not least, I started Narberth Cycling Club a year and a half ago. We now have 361 members. And by request, someone asked if they could ride along with me one day to Trader Joe's. And I said, you know what, let's make an event for the cycling club. We had 11 people show up on a Monday morning to ride to the grocery store with me. So this has now become a weekly event. Every Monday morning at 9:30, we meet downtown and we ride to Trader Joe's and we get our groceries. Trader Joe's loves it. Every Monday, they're like, oh, the Narberth Cycling Club's here. But just this picture itself is so interesting to me because in February, when I started offering these rides, we were the only family in Narberth that had a cargo style bicycle and that we were using primarily to get around. And this picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It really shows you that people in the community are buying into the idea of ditching the car to get around for local stuff and starting to use bicycles for local trips. So there are now, at my last count, there's now 11 families in Narberth with a cargo bike that they're using for local transportation. So, this is, earlier this summer, we went into the city on a really hot day, this Sister Cities Park, with my daughters, and I'm towing my oldest her bike when she got tired. And then in the back here is my mother-in-law. She rides an electrified trike. So she moved here to the area about a year and a half ago from the Jersey Shore, and she was really inspired to start trying to get around with her trike. But again, with the hills, it's pretty limiting with range. So my husband added a pedal assist electric capacity to her bike, and then she now bikes everywhere. So it's really inspiring to me that my 67-year-old mother-in-law is getting around on her electric trike. But just to give you an idea, in 2017, January 1st, that's when I committed to start biking year-round. So in 2017, I biked 733 miles that I would have used a car. And at the end of the year, I calculated the carbon savings, and it was 664 pounds of carbon that I had kept out of the earth. And then year to date, I've now gone almost 1,000 miles on the bike that I've ditched the car. And again, the carbon savings, 831 pounds. So just offering a little bit different perspective from the electric vehicle conversation. My setup is about $3,500. And that's, you know, the lower end. And this is just one type of cargo bike. There are lots of them out there. But again, this is a good fit for us right now. It carries 4 kids, 600 pounds of carrying capacity in the bucket. So this really is our SUV that we use. It carries more kids than my car. So.
When you say electric assist, is that a battery, or do you actually power it through the pedals and then it gives you extra power when you need it? How's that work?
So it's a battery, and by pedal assist, I mean that you have to pedal to get the assist to kick in and help you. So and there's levels of assist, there's 5 on our bike. So level 1 is just a tiny little nudge. So when I'm going up a hill and I click it, I have the option to use it or not use it, is one thing. So most of the time I have it in 0 where I'm not using any assist, but when I bump it up to 1, it's just like I'm pedaling and doing some work, but it's like someone's right behind me pushing the back of the bike and giving me a little boost to get up the hill. So it's kind of hard to see. Let's see if I can.
It's a battery-powered motor.
What does level 5 do? How much of a push?
So if you see the black box in front of my bucket in this top right photo, that's the battery mount. So right,
Yes, right here.
level 5, I don't even know. I've never used level 5, honestly. Again, I can get 40, 50 miles out of a charge. I don't use this very often. And it's just a matter of pulling the battery out and I plug it into my outlet on the charger. And by the next morning, I will have a full charge. I only charge maybe twice a month. So I don't use the assist a lot. But when I'm on a heavy load, I use it a lot. So. All right.
You done?
Yes, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Kim. I'm Dan Wall. I'm a family physician. I teach at Bryn Hospital in the family practice residency program. And I have to say, I'm really thrilled by Kim's presentation because not only are we seeing multiple generations benefit from bicycling, I mean, look at the expression on Kim's mother-in-law's face. Here's a happy, I'm 62, so I'm not too far from being an elder, so I will say happy elder, who is getting exercise, fresh air, combating osteoporosis and a host of other illnesses that so she can look forward to many more years, I hope, of vibrancy. And her kids also are learning about active transportation, so they are following in their grandmother's footsteps, essentially, thanks to their mom and dad, who really put us on the path to a sustainable future. So now I'd like to call up our EV owner panelists, so they can introduce themselves. I don't have an electric bike. I have my second electric car, which is a Chevy Bolt. I had a Nissan Leaf until it met with an unfortunate accident, which everyone survived and hurt, thank goodness. So let's go from right to left. Your name, what you do, and what you drive.
So I'm Amy Takaski Feldman. If you're associated with the school, you recognize that because my husband teaches here. And I'm a retired educator, and I now am working as a climate activist with the Citizens Climate Lobby. And my car is a 2015 Nissan Leaf, which I don't know how many people looked at the cars out there, but it's out there on campus in the show of cars. And I'm kind of also speaking for my husband, who's another Volt owner who needs to heal up from his cold so he can teach tomorrow. So he's not here right now.
Okay, so I'm Stu Achman. I bought a Tesla for my wife, a Model S, in June of 2015. Probably shouldn't say this, but I fell asleep at the wheel a month ago, so that car is no longer with us. In the meantime, and no, it wasn't under autopilot at the time. In the meantime, I got a Model 3 in February, took it up to Watkins Glen in July for a few days at the track. Tore up the brakes on the first day, came back to the dealer the next day, Saturday, and asked what I could get in a trade-in for a Model 3 Performance Plus. And they gave me about $10,000 more than I was expecting, so I traded it in 2 days later and picked up the Performance Plus 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, leaving the Lincoln Tunnel out of Manhattan, I hit a pothole, broke a rim. So today, if anyone wants to come out, I have a $110,000 Model S 100D that you can all get in because it's not mine. But you could have it mine anyway.
I'm Rich Buxton, and I've leased cars through Ford for several years. And in 2013, I leased a 36-month lease, a Ford C-Max, and that was gasoline and battery. When I turned that in July 2016, the salesman introduced me to the C-Max Energy. So that is a plug-in, so it's gas and electric. On a summer day, it will give me about 25 miles of electrical charge. That would pretty much get me to and from work. If I went out to the dry cleaner during lunch at work to pick something out, or went out to lunch, the last couple of miles getting up the Blue Route would be the gasoline. I left full-time employment at the end of July. I don't say retire because I actually interviewed for a 16-hour-a-week job. Doesn't that sound great? Who wants to work 40 hours anymore, right? So I'm getting even better mileage now. The last time I filled my tank was September 21st. I track it, I keep my miles. So now that I'm not taking that commute to work, one moves in, but again, 2 days a week, I'm getting over 100 miles a gallon because basically I'm just in the community. I just love driving it. Last year, between the efficiency of the car and shopping at Giant and getting the gas points through Giant, I drove my car last year 12,000 miles, and I spent $249 on gas. I'd go 4 or 5 weeks between fill-ups, and right now it's even longer. So I still have half a tank of gas left from September 21st. I'm looking to upgrade, so when the lease is up next July, I won't necessarily be going back and getting a Ford. Ford is kind of doing some wacky stuff right now, but I know that I'll upgrade, and I will never go back to anything that's not an EV.
Thank you. So I think I want there to be lots of questions, time for questions, because that's why I came here. So, and then I'll fill in for any details on, say, the Chevy Volt. So, go ahead.
Range anxiety is always an issue, and we'd love to hear more about that for those who are driving. But the question I have is perhaps a technical question. That is, these are lithium batteries that are powering either the hybrids or the full EVs. And although lithium is supposed to be a memory-free experience, they seem to wear out over time, and there seems to be a cycle issue. That is, you don't get the lithium battery all empty before you fill it up. And is there, what's known about the number of cycles that a typical battery can go through before it has to be replaced, or is that become now a non-issue?
I believe it's become almost a non-issue for a few reasons. You're absolutely right. You may lose 1 to 3% of your range the first year, and maybe 1% every year after that. So eventually, you're probably going to need to replace your battery if you keep the car forever. People seem to think, I don't think there's anyone knows, but these batteries may last as long as 20 years with some reduced range. The next part of the question, what was the next part of the question?
The range anxiety issue.
Well, the range anxiety, that's a complete myth. I mean, it may have been true when we got our first Tesla in 2015, but
The map we
I
showed.
mean, the map was over a year old. That map looks entirely different.
I would like to speak to range anxiety because I'm driving a 2015 Leaf that has an 80 to 90 mile range. And so in that case, if you've got an older car, you do have to think about how far you can go. The Leaf that I have doesn't have a quick charge on it. And I think that there is a sense that if you are in the market for a less expensive car, that it's not going to be an option for you. And I think that in fact, it really, you have to look at your particular situation. The 80 mile range that I have on my Leaf, it's a second car for us. So the Volt has the gas backup. When we need to make a long trip, we take the Volt. But I drive the 20 mile commute to the work that I do at the barn. And maybe I come home for an hour or so, which, given that I don't have a 220 line in my garage, means that I'm not getting a lot more charge during that time. And I can still go out and pick someone up at the airport and drive back, or do something that I have to do in Center
How much
City.
does that drop in the dead of winter?
Not significantly unless you're doing a lot of highway driving. So when the place where that drops the most is if I'm driving at high speeds. But my point is that there are so many options for different cars at different price points. Used cars, new cars, cars with a lot of range, cars with a little range. And it's worth first thinking about what your particular situation is and what you need to do, because there may be options out there for you. Actually, when I got that Leaf, I was thinking, well, I'm buying this older model car, but it's okay because when my range starts to drop, they will have the newer models out with the higher range, and they've promised to have the same battery pack, and I can switch out the batteries and make that investment and get the higher range. But now I come to find out that mine is new enough that it's among those batteries that you're saying where actually the range doesn't decrease very much, and it's not expected to. So I think I might be stuck with the 80 mile range in this until I decide I don't want this car anymore. But I doubt that it's ever going to break because it doesn't have any moving parts. So
as another comment, I think a really good example of range anxiety was Kimberly's experience when she was pregnant and she had to call her husband because she couldn't move her bike and her kid and her second child to be. And she adapted her bike, but she's also adapted her where she goes to her range, the electric bike, for example. And just with that electrification, you're able to get all the way down to Citizens Bank Park, which I think is awesome. But on the electric car front, when my wife and I had our 2013 Leaf, which we owned for 4 years, the first year we had it, we didn't have a 220 Charger at all, and it was our primary car. Our Toyota Prius became our backup car, just this second car and long trips. And we just plugged it in like our cell phone at night, and it was ready to go the next morning. And we never had, the only time we had a problem, got close to completely draining the battery was when I drove up to Bethlehem for a conference, and I forgot my charging cable. I realized it about 20 miles into the trip, and I ended up charging at a General Motors dealership on the way, once we got there, and on the way back, I charged at a Pizza Hut, believe it or not, and had an electric smart car as their delivery car, and that was enough of a boost while we're eating pizza to get back to Philly. And I had just enough juice to get home from there. So, with proper planning, it's not an issue. But you have to think about what kind of driving you do, and then there's so much choices now in terms of charging and vehicles. You can find something that fits your life. Good, question?
Yes, what's the actual cost to charge the battery?
So, the actual cost is the cost per kilowatt hour of electricity. And in my case, it's about 14.5 cents. And a Model S, it cost me 5 cents a mile, and a Model 3, it cost me 3 cents a mile, on average.
Yes.
This is an environmental conference. We all know the history of lead acid batteries in North Philadelphia and lead poisoning and such. The U.S. doesn't produce lithium. We have a national security issue there, perhaps in terms of the acquisition of lithium. But what about the ultimate demise of the battery, and how is that going to be handled environmentally? Since we're told we shouldn't throw lithium batteries into the either real trash or the hazmat, how's that ultimately going to impact on our environment if we're going to depend more on something that we don't produce ourselves? We have to acquire from unfriendly people at times, that kind of stuff.
That's a really important question. New technologies are evolving all the time. The Nissan company is taking batteries which are partially damaged, so they don't have as much range as they did, and they are reusing them in settings as places to store solar energy. So, but there are other issues with lithium. There are issues of where things are mined and what are the economic justice issues. And these are big issues. And as someone who works on climate change, I can say I dearly hope that our species survives long enough to have to worry about piles of lithium batteries. The first and most important thing we have to do is reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. That said, there are new technologies evolving all the time, and in fact, there is a zinc air battery, which is now not being used in cars, but it is being used for storage. It's being sold and set up in third world countries and island nations where they need battery backup for solar storage, where they're skipping over fossil fuels altogether. That's a technology which is going to be a lot cleaner and a lot better than the lithium ion and a lot cheaper. And the zinc is a very common material that is around, as opposed to lithium, which frankly, ultimately, we want to be saving for other purposes. I don't think lithium ion battery is the end in battery development. And I think when we get a carbon tax in place, the money is going to be flowing to that innovation and to those issues. But we will have to also be really vocal and really pressing people about, you can't just throw your trash out and poison people.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, that's a really important issue. General Motors actually opened a new plant. I don't remember where it is, but the plant is running on renewable energy, mostly generated on site, and they are using batteries from scrapped Chevy Volts as their energy storage system. So you'll see that more and more. Any other questions? Anyone else want to share their experiences with their own electric bike or, yes?
I just wanted to say something about the range anxiety. I have a Chevy Volt. One of the reasons we have it is we take long trips. For the long trips, we can set it on gas only and save the battery charge for later for when you're in the back roads or in the city later going in. Or if you're in a traffic jam and you want to creep forward and not burn the gas while you're sitting in traffic. So you can do that sort of thing. But around home, just about everywhere we go is within the range, battery range of the car. Even if it weren't, there's no anxiety about the battery range because you have the gas to back you up. And the difference between that and a battery electric vehicle is you can't use your whole charge up and still get home. So your range is effectively reduced in the BEV car compared to, say, the Volt, where you can use the full range.
That's an excellent point. And that matches my experience with the Volt as well. Yes.
Yeah, one bonus that I've received, because with my C-Max Energy, I'm getting a max of a 25-mile electric charge. So that would barely get me to New Jersey if we're going on vacation. And we went up to Acadia National Park in Maine. And so I got the initial 25 electric miles. After that, for the whole week, I was on gas only because I couldn't recharge it up in Maine. What I found is that I still receive 45 miles per gallon, which beats just about every other vehicle out there, even without the electric charge. So that was a delight. That was a bonus for me to get that mileage on gas.
Well, it's a conventional hybrid once the battery is depleted, the C-Max. It runs as a conventional hybrid, the C-Max Energy.
Yeah.
So you're not running just on gas, you're running on gas and electric.
I don't
Well,
want
the gas is still the primary fuel. The electric part is recovering energy.
Yeah,
that-
well, I understand, but he's saying that he's running, it made it sound like you're just running the gas engine, but no, the gas engine shuts on and off like a conventional hybrid. That's why you're getting 45 miles per gallon.
So I'm glad you mentioned the Acadia National Park, because I recently found out that Pennsylvania is installing EV chargers at all of its state parks so that they can promote EV ownership throughout the state park system, throughout Pennsylvania, and you can go to a state park and not worry about getting home, in your own vehicle. Also, Pennsylvania still has pretty generous state incentives for EVs, at least through this year, that include a $750 rebate if you buy a used EV. The amount of the incentive depends on the range, battery capacity of the car you're buying.
Quick one.
Yes.
I haven't heard this mentioned. One way to deal with range anxiety is decide on a car for your everyday 90% of your applications. The time when you want to go on vacation or out of town or a longer trip, rent a car. Enterprise rents it for $10 a day for the weekend. So that's what we do
Yeah.
when we go to the Jersey Shore or something. We go to Enterprise. So you don't need to carry that gasoline tank around wherever you go. Do that with Enterprise occasionally. And it's, in our case, it's usually not more than once a month when we reach out for that. So my option is go all electric, don't limp along on the gasoline engine.
And relative to what you're saying about not hauling all that weight of the gasoline, my husband does not keep the gas tank on his boat full. He has a little bit of gas in it for the commute that he's doing 90% of the time, and he only fills it when we're taking a trip because he wants it to be
Basically, this
energy.
is thinking multimodal with the car. Like, we talk about bikes in transit, but also different kinds of car. One car is not the solution for all your transportation.
That's an
That's it.
excellent point. We also live in an area well served by trains. So if you're thinking of going up to Maine, you can take a train to Maine and be mainly on the plane. But anyway, you can start thinking about not driving all the way up I-95 to get where you're going, and you arrive rested, relaxed. You can have a conversation with your traveling companion and read and do all sorts of other things. And when you actually figure out the cost of driving that distance, train is really competitive. And then suddenly you're thinking, well, maybe we don't need a second car. Oh, we've got our electric car and maybe a bike, and that's all we need. We've got the rest of the infrastructure supporting our other travel needs. Yes.
In terms of the used car, do most people, or not most people, but is there a resale value to this, to these cars? Is there availability of used in these?
So we originally were looking for used cars. We hadn't thought we were ready to move to electric yet. We hadn't installed the 220 charger when we had electrical work done. And there's so many great options now for how to search for which car you want, you know, between Car Guru and Auto Trader. What happened with us is that we didn't end up getting the used car because we found that it's a new enough technology and the technology is changing up so fast that we wound up getting new cars that were the last year's model, but they were new off the lot. And so we got incredible deals on them. So my Nissan Leaf, which was brand new off the lot, was $15,000 after all of the rebates from the company. And I think my husband spent $20,000 on his brand new Volt. But there are used cars around, and that you can find them and search these different vehicles. And there's a new thing that's just started where somebody's selling cars through, and I think it's used cars, through a vending machine. And I can't remember the name of the thing, but if you search Carvana.
And I have no association with the company.
So Carvana, you can get used electric cars with Carvana that there's like a ton of electric cars out there, and most of them are not available in Pennsylvania. And so there are cars that are being made that are like, well, you can get this in Colorado or in California, like there's a little car called a Spark, and different little cars that might fit your needs, and Carvana will deliver as part of the price of the car. So I think there are a lot of ways to work that, and it's really worth taking the time to figure out what your particular needs are and then poke around, because it's possible to get used cars, yeah.
Ever since the demise of my beloved Nissan Leaf, I've been actually keeping an eye on used Leaf prices, because when our almost 11-year-old Prius dies, we're been planning to replace it with a used Leaf, because we don't drive our second car very much. And they're running somewhere between $8,000 and $11,000 for a 4-year-old model. And that still has decent battery range. It's backed up by the manufacturers. It still has under the battery warranty as well. And as far as batteries in used electric and hybrid cars, there's a whole, there are now companies that remanufacture the batteries. So if your Prius battery goes to put there's a company that will drive to you with a remanufactured battery and install it for you and take the old one. So I think that's going to be developing for electric vehicles as well.
You do want to get the battery checked by somebody if you're buying used, because that is the single most expensive thing to replace on an all-electric vehicle. And and I wish my husband weren't under the weather today because he checked all this out, but there are people who will look at the battery and give you an idea of where it is in its lifespan. And that's very important to do if you buy used.
Yes.
How important was the federal and state rebates in your decision initially to purchase the car? And they're kind of going away. They're going away because either the manufacturers have met their number of cars to be sold, or we have an administration that's decided we don't need these incentives anymore. The companies initially priced their product incorporating the incentive there. Do you expect, looking in the crystal ball, that the companies will break their prices down to more reasonable prices for new vehicles once the incentives go away? I wonder about your thoughts.
I'm not sure anyone can have any thoughts about that right now. I can't tell the economic level of everyone in here, but if your economic level is high, you should obviously look at a Tesla. They start at $35,000 new, and for what used to be a $75,000 car, the used ones now are probably, you can get them in the low 30s, maybe even the high 20s. And the nice thing about, I think all electric cars, but certainly Teslas and certainly the big ones, is the bodies are all aluminum. There's nothing going to rust. The engine, the drivetrain, the battery and the drivetrain are guaranteed for 8 years, unlimited miles, and none of them are 8 years old yet. And there's no maintenance. I mean, we made the mistake of prepaying maintenance for the first 4 years, and or 50,000 miles, whatever came first. We stopped driving. We stopped flying everywhere east of the Mississippi because it's so much fun to drive a Tesla. They drive themselves on highways. When we bought it, all of the supercharging fuel was free, so probably up to $3,000 or $4,000 in free fuel. You go to a place like Disney World in an electric car. You go to, what's the one with the Epcot? Go to Epcot. The electric car parking, first of all, it's the same price. For the same price you pay for parking, which is free if you stay at a Disney resort, you can pull up to an electric car parking spot closer to the monorail and the entrance than the handicap parking. You can plug in, it'll cost you less than $5 for the electricity to fill up your car while you're there. And, other people are paying $30 or $40 extra for preferred parking, which is half a mile further away than you are. You can park at the closest gate in the Philadelphia airport, short-term parking. They have chargers there in 3 of the 6 terminals, I think. You can park there for, I'm thinking the charging is free there. So if you have an electric car and you're only going to be away for a day or 2, you get the best parking there. Longwood Gardens parking's free.
There are two things that really affect the price of electric cars, right? So one thing is the batteries are expensive, and the more range you get, the more expensive that car is. That will come down as we build more of them and as we invest more money there. And the other thing that really affects any new technology are the economies of scale. So the more of something that you make, the cheaper it is to make it. I do work for getting a carbon price put in place, but truthfully, when we have a carbon price put in place, we will have innovation. We will have bikes that work for everybody that are at reasonable cost. We will have better electric cars. I think the crossover point is predicted to be, and Noel probably knows more about this than I do, but I think the crossover point for when these cars become competitive without any rebates is coming very quickly, even without a price on carbon.
2020.
2020. There you go.
So we're about out of time. Thank you very much. Let's, one more
I just wanted
question.
to ask about the 20-volt charger. I don't know if any of you mentioned if you did that, and I'd like to know what was the cost if you did,
The 240 volt charge.
the charger?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did mine for about $100 in parts. I did it myself. They're fabulous on YouTube, fabulous videos, step by step how to put in a 220, 240 volt. Go ahead.
I can answer that. The charger itself can, or there are many models out there, but it can be had for around $600. And then you need the electrician, whether it's in-house or somebody else, to install it. So there are companies that do the all-in-one, they sell you the Solar States, one of the solar guys, they do the electrical, they install the things around $3,000, like all inclusive. So that's the range of prices, 100.
And again,
Yeah, the Teslas have the charger in the car, so you
Right.
don't need, they plug in
Yeah, if
directly.
you buy a Tesla, you won't have to buy that
You
$600.
you don't need a charger.
it does depend on what, it
Well,
does depend on what your needs are, because I haven't put one in. So you have to also look at your own needs, because I have a 120 line in my garage, that was what was there. And I thought, well, we're gonna have to upgrade. We hadn't expected to buy the electric car, and it's been almost 3 years, and it's just a non-issue for us. But
So you
we
can start with the.
plug the car in at night, when we get up in the morning, it's charged. I have no idea how long it takes, I don't care.
Yeah, we had a BMW i3, very similar. We never plugged that in anything but 110. We had it for 2 years.
Thank you.
And I bought my 220 charger from a friend who had one I didn't need. And I think it was like $150. He shipped it to me, and then when I put solar panels in my house, the Solar States installed it for free. So thank you very much. Thanks for your testing.